All right, with me now, I have got Dogs 247 Jordan Hill to talk a little bit of the Georgia Auburn matchup this weekend. Jordan, how you doing?
Doing great. Just ready for what for Georgia is the first rivalry week of the season. It's always a fun time and excited to see what happens Saturday.
Yeah, the Deep South rivalry. So we've got to talk about Georgia. The last 2 weeks, it's been kind of surprising to see the scores that they have come up with Kent State and Missouri. So, what do you think that the Bulldogs are struggling with right now? What's going on?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting two games because you look 2 weeks ago against Kent State, you sort of think, well, you're playing a MAC team, maybe they kind of sleptwalk, and also it was a noon game, maybe it's a situation where you just kind of sleepwalk. Then you go on the road and play a Missouri team that was coming off a really rough loss to Auburn, and it was struggles much like we saw against Kent State. The two things that really stand out to me from those two games that it popped up in both games were turnovers. This is a Georgia team that started the year. First three games did not turn the ball over one single time. Last 2 weeks have had at least two turnovers in both of those games. And I think that really hurt them. I think it kind of threw things off, particularly those turnovers, the majority of them happened in the first half. I think it was sort of a situation where both times the offense sort of turned around and was like, it kind of discombobulated what they were trying to do. And I think that was a big problem. The biggest problem Saturday against Missouri was just the offensive line. They could get no push, particularly in the run game. Kirby Smart didn't mince his words about it afterwards, said we just got whipped up front, which is, we don't see a whole lot with a Georgia team that's full of 4 stars and 5 stars, particularly up front. So it's definitely two very interesting results to see sort of the struggles that we didn't really anticipate, especially after the way they opened the season, beating Oregon in the fashion they did. But a lot of intrigue going into this game to see if Georgia can kind of snap out of these last 2 weeks and try to return to form as a team that some people think could be the best in the nation.
Yeah, and you said that you think they may have just gone into these games almost asleep. So, do you think these two games were a bit of a wake up call for the Bulldogs?
I really think more the Missouri game than the Kent State game because even with that Kent State game, they were mostly up 2 touchdowns. You never really thought being at that game, oh, they could lose. That was a very different story than it was in Columbia Saturday night. Harrison Mevis hits a 56-yard field goal, and I was there at the game. I was in the press box, and after he hit that, I thought Georgia's going to lose this game. And credit to the Bulldogs, credit to guys like Stetson Bennett, guys like Dejon Edwards, guys like Kenny McIntosh. They desperately needed to move the ball, and they did in the final probably 8 minutes of that game. Offensive line that, again, as Kirby Smart had said, had been getting whipped throughout the game, really stepped up. Really opened some holes for the running backs, and they found a way to win. And as ugly as that was, and I know a lot of Georgia fans were not thrilled by that performance, there are going to be situations where great teams run into teams that came in knowing what the kind of competition they were playing, and Georgia had a really off night, but when you can have an off night and still win, that separates good teams from great teams. And this is an opportunity for this team to learn from that. And now play an Auburn team that, had a good first half against LSU and then wasn't able to do anything in the second half. This is a very good opportunity for Georgia to kind of have a get right game, but it's not going to be a gimme. They have to show up and be ready to play.
So, how do you think that Georgia's defense can go about neutralizing Auburn's quarterback, Robbie Ashford? He is a dual threat, and he seems to work really well under pressure.
The biggest thing with Robbie Ashford and trying to slow him down is going to be just staying patient because I think he's going to scramble from time to time. Really, the biggest plays that Auburn was able to make against LSU came on what became scrambles where Robbie Ashford, who really talented guy. Kirby Smart talked about him on Monday and said he was a guy that Georgia recruited way back when he was at Hoover High School over there in Alabama. But it's just a situation where you have to understand he's probably going to make a few plays over the course of this game. I wouldn't be surprised if Auburn is able to spring some explosive plays, but you just have to limit those. You cannot allow him to throw you off. You can't allow him to really get comfortable. If Georgia's able to come after him, especially, it's going to be a tall task just because of how athletic he is. But Georgia's probably going to be playing without Jalen Carter, who a lot of people think could be a top 5 pick in next April's draft. So they have to make him uncomfortable. They have to take advantage if he does make mistakes. Kind of the turning point in that LSU loss for Auburn was a fumble that Robbie Ashford had that got returned for a touchdown. And that was sort of when the momentum really shifted and LSU kind of took that game over, if those opportunities present themselves on Saturday, Georgia has to take advantage, or it could be another four-quarter game.
So, what facet of this game coming up do you see this matchup being the strongest in?
I think the biggest thing that is going to tell if Auburn is going to keep this close, which I mean, I've seen a few different lines. I think Georgia might be something like a 4 touchdown favorite. If Auburn's offensive line gets pushed around, it's not going to be a very close game. Auburn has struggled to move the ball. They were really exploited in the Penn State loss. They just weren't able to get any kind of push, and Penn State's defenders pretty much lived in the Auburn backfield. They have got to shore things up if they're going to be able to, even again, if Jalen Carter's not able to play. Georgia still has plenty of talent. Michael Williams, Nazir Stackhouse, some of those players are going to feast on a really rough Auburn offensive line. And then, sort of on the other side, it's going to be if Georgia can really shake off what was a shaky performance of the offensive line against Missouri, against an Auburn defensive line that has playmakers, but is coming off a really tough loss in the fact that Eku Leota, one of their best edge rushers, is out. They think he might miss the rest of the season. He's definitely going to miss this game on Saturday. If Georgia can impose its will as far as the offensive line, it could be a situation by the end of the third quarter. It's pretty clear that Georgia's moving on to another win.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us, Jordan. We will catch you on the next one.
Sounds great. Appreciate it.